Welcome. My name is Jon. I'm a recovered alcoholic and drug addict, and my talk today is on that subject of recovered. And in the spiritual life, one of the principles, one of the values that we are given is that we continue to grow and expand our spiritual capacity. We grow and expand in our thinking and our belief systems and our understanding of who God is. And I feel like I'm sharing something, and the tendency is to share it with everybody like I've known this my whole life. But as I grow in my spiritual life, I'm still learning and getting revelation. And I think part of the spiritual life is not relying on yesterday's meal or last week's experience, or 10 years ago, I had a really good steak. But the spiritual life is one that we're being fed throughout the day. And so we should have new revelations, and we should have new understandings of God's goodness and of God's heart and of God's desire for us, and how God wants to direct us and let us be light and love to the world around us. I think we should grow in the understanding of that. So I'm coming to you today from like a growing revelation of who God is and how God dwells within me, and what that recovered really means. Because when you hear that word recovered, maybe it rings something in your spirit of like, oh, he's up on this pedestal, or it sounds very arrogant, or, oh, wow, I want to be recovered. Like whatever that means, I don't think I have it and I want it. And so I don't come from a spirit of division, but a spirit of unity. Because that's one of the values and principles we have in the spiritual life, is that they will know that we have a relationship with God because of our unity and because of our love. And that's what God really brings inside of us, is this unity and his love. And so that's what I want to talk about is what does recovered actually mean? Like what's my new revelation of that? So it's not to split up a room, but in my perception, it gives hope to those that are unrecovered, that are lost, that are full of fear, that addictions running their lives, that relationships and they're just being dominated and controlled by the outside, the coming at them, the things that they're involved in, money issues, relationship issues, just being driven and have this heap of responsibility. What I want to introduce is that this spiritual life is a life of freedom. And if we totally understand that we have a position to play, that God is actually the Father, the father, a good father doesn't pour and heap on responsibility onto the children. So I get to be the child, and I get to enter this relationship that maybe started with grace, and we all understand this grace period. You show up late to return a book, or maybe you show up late for a car rental, and you're an hour late and you're like, oh, they're going to charge me for a whole day. And maybe the lady says, oh, we have a grace period, so there's no extra charge. And so that's what grace is. It's just this period of, I'm going to cover it, and don't worry, there's no burden of this. But the reality is, in the life of addiction, we come into recovery, and all of a sudden we're experiencing this freedom from the substance. And this is called a grace period, where God is doing for us what we could never do for ourselves. We could be in the illusion, though, that we're actually like, okay, we determined, we put the stake in the sand, this time I really mean it. The reality is grace has a expiry date. And it might be 5 days, it might be a month. I see it at a month, often 3 months, 6 months, but we have to move into relationship. And so this is what the concept is that I can recover a relationship that was lost, and I'll get into that near the end. And so I'll jump around in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. And so at the very beginning, the title says, this is the story of many thousands of men and women who have recovered from alcoholism. It doesn't say alcohol. It doesn't say addiction. It says alcoholism. ism. And so I think that they're referring to the ism. It's almost pointing us to the problem right away, that maybe alcohol is not the problem, maybe relationships aren't the problem, maybe the outside isn't the problem, it's the ism, the I, self, and me. And this is where we come into unity of the understanding of where the real problem is. It's this ism. And so on page X, page XII, I probably have a different page number than you. It talks about coming into recovery, coming into this place of really understanding that you have no control in your life. The inside benefits of addiction are starting to outweigh all of the consequences that you've been facing. Like, it's just not working anymore. I have no control, and I need something more than therapy, than human aid can offer, than medication can offer. Like, I'm destroying. I'm destructing from the inside out. And the wisdom of the book, it says, just pause and read some of the 44 stories in the back and see if you can relate. See if you have anything in common with them, and then just see if this is something that you want to proceed with. And I believe that story is our number one gift to the world around us. And so we have entered into this story of recovery through a relationship with God that solves the ism. And so we do an art night once a month, and it's called Ashes to Rubies, and people come to share their stories. They're 10-minute stories. And so we want to relate, and we want to build a line of transmission and give people a narrative of, I've been there. I want to really expose guilt and shame and vulnerability, and it'll bring you out of those things to want a new solution. And so, do you want what I have because I just related to you? The book also says on the next page, the forward to the first edition, really what we're being invited into is the new story. And so I've always looked at the spiritual life, the emotional life as a handbook of a set of rules that we have to follow, like kind of like the rules of the road. But the reality is I get to actually come into the story. And so I need to actually change the narrative in my head of like going from the rule book and the restraints and the control and the domination from denominations of church and of religion and of schooling and of home parenting and all of that stuff. I actually have to just go, there is no rule book. That's man-made. The storybook is what God is inviting me into. And we all have a story in the spiritual life of recovery. And so it's a beautiful thing when we get to share our story wherever we're at. And so our books is suggesting that it says, and besides many, we are sure that our way of living has its advantages for all. So it's suggesting as you enter into recovery, as you enter into the story, you have a whole new way of living. The way of your living before, it wasn't substantial. It had no purpose. It had no meaning. It was full of chaos. It was full of consequences and results of you weren't well physically, emotionally, and spiritually. And we're offering a new way of living. And so, what is that of what we are talking about? I just wanted to quickly explain of the kind of the three parts that I get to recover from. Two of them are none of my business, and those two are what happens to me physically and what happens to me mentally. And so what happens to me physically when I take in an addictive substance, for me it could be, I'm even addressing like sugar. What does sugar do in my body right now? Is it producing a craving for more that I can't stop? With alcohol and drugs, when I put these things in my body, it had an abnormal reaction that produced a craving for more. So when I had a drink, I was like, that was a good drink. Two would be better. And then I keep getting more thirsty as the night goes on, and I'm at 8 and 9 and 15. And that is just a ridiculous amount of anything to drink. Even recreational drugs or whatever it is, I just start them and I can't seem to stop. What I could stop before is now growing in, and I have very little control. So that is the physical part of it, which is really none of my business in recovery. That's not what I'm responsible for. And then the second part of it is when I see that I can't take care of my responsibilities of life, I'm ignoring my kids, I'm disconnected from the world around me, my wife and the relationships, and it's just like too much that I can bear. And I go, okay, I'm not going to drink anymore, or I'm going to try to do it this way. And that all fails, and medication and therapy and all of this stuff that I go to for trying to get my life back on track. After a certain amount of time, the mental part of my disease kicks in and says, man, it's been 3 months. It's been 6 months. Good boy. You could loosen up a little bit. There's nothing wrong with having a glass of wine at dinner with your wife. Like we're all made up. We're all kissy. Everything's good. Like I made too big of a deal about this. Like I got my life back on track. Everything's going well. My bank account is looking good. The kids are being taken care of. There's not a cloud in the sky. It's all good. The tornado mess has been cleaned up. And I go down that path, and all of a sudden the next tornado hits. And I'm like, how did this happen again? And it's this revolving mental and physical destructive behavior that turns into compulsive with no control. And this is the disease concept that no medication or no human aid could ever help. And so now what my responsibility is actually looking at the ism, the part of me that actually has the problem, and it's spiritual at nature. And so now that I look at this physical problem, so if you're somebody just listening to this first time, and there's stuff and relationships and even work and money and finances and sugar and self-harm and all of these things, everything in between, if there are things that you're getting results that you don't want to do, that is causing burdens and consequences in your life, maybe look at this. Am I physically and mentally different than the world around me? Am I physically and mentally different than the people are doing these activities? I don't compare myself to different people. I compare myself to other drinkers. And so is that happening? So the qualification of addiction and period is on page 44. If when honestly you want to, you cannot quit entirely, or if when drinking you have little control over the amount you take, you may be alcoholic. Fill in the blank. It might be relationships. It might be chaos. It might be overthinking. It might be the adrenaline. It might be sugar. It might be work. It might be money. It might be your children, whatever it is that you're have no control over, and it's dominating your life. If that be the case, you may be suffering from an illness which only a spiritual experience will conquer. And so here we're in this dilemma that the only responsibility that I have is not even taking the substance away, not taking the mental part away, but actually being in a relationship with the Spirit of God that will solve all of my problems. And so when we look at what the problem is, it's spiritual at nature. And so in the big book on page 64, it actually says liquor, and fill in the blank, relationships, adrenaline, whatever it is, was a symptom. We had to get down to root causes. And we have a spiritual disease. We've been spiritually sick. And when the spiritual malady is overcome, we straighten out mentally and physically. So my goal is to straighten out mentally and physically. I actually have to have a new way of living. And that's the spiritual life, the new way of living. And then we find out a little bit later on that there is actually no cure. It says in our book that there is no cure. There is only a daily reprieve contingent on my spiritual contact with God. And so how do I get this? I have to come into the realization that this is me and that I am hopeless and that no human aid will ever help me. And I need the power of God in my life. My belief doesn't give me, my belief doesn't give me his power. I have to actually have his power. So this is what recovered really looks like, is I have the power of God doing for me on a continuous basis, on a daily basis, because I have a daily relationship with this power that solves all of my problems. And so we put the stake in the sand right here. We say, and they would call it in our LifeLab, we have this prayer, and it's going into the inventories, and it says, God, it says, Jesus, I offer myself to thee. And the responsibility of that, this is a prayer of action. There's no amen on that prayer. And I go into action and I look at the things that were causing the inside of me to be the ism, to be self-focused, to be insecure, full of self-pity, all of those things, irritable, restlessness, there's no purpose, there, all of these things inside of me. I need to get that out. So I do this inventory process. I look at what the driving fears are. And ultimately, I believe that I'm going to fail and God's not going to come through if I wanted to boil all my fears down. And I get to give that to God, of going like, I'm looking in the garden, it's not going well, we need a whole new garden. And I give it to him, and I say, I just take the good and the bad. And we go into this prayer. It's called a step 7 prayer. I say, my creator, I'm now willing that you have all of me. Please take this, the good and the bad, because I can't tell the difference. And now I get to have the breathing room, because it's up to God to take it away, root and branch, all of it. And this is how we become a new creation. This is how we have conscious contact with God. It's from the inside. I don't go to church, I get to be the church. I don't go to do the Spirit, I get the Spirit within me. Because Jesus says, I am the door, I am the light, I am the truth, I am the way. Those things I don't have, but they come within me. I get to be the Spirit and the light and the love of God. I get to be the doorway into other people's experiences. And with this experience inside of me, I get to be the hands and feet of Jesus down here on earth. And so I don't have a cure, I just have a daily reprieve contingent on my relationship with God on a daily basis. So our primary purpose, the purpose for us, the real purpose, it says in the big book, is to be a fit spiritual condition. And so once we go through this inventory process, we get this out, God takes it out, root and branch, we start to have a relationship with God within us. Every day is a day that I look forward to passing on the message to somebody, to growing in my spiritual life, to be stretched, to be molded into the shape of the Father, into the child that he wants me to be, the representation that he wants me to be. I get to be his employee. I get to be his actor on stage. I get the script every day from him. And so I do that through a process on a daily basis of like going into prayer in the morning and just not inviting him, because I just want to invite myself into his garden, because he's always there. He's never gone. He's never left. He's always there. And I just have to come into the realization of it. So I wake up in the morning and I plug into God like I plugged in my phone last night, because that phone is pretty freaking important to me. It better be charged, because I got to use it all day. And so I have to charge myself first thing in the morning, and I just put God inside. Like I just say, I want to feel your presence. I want to be cleansed and to be cleaned. I just want to walk hand in hand with you. And then I go into a time of just getting instructions. Would you just inspire my thinking? What posts do I need to do today? What silly things can we do? Can we take a kegerator out into the snow and do a little video? Can we? I didn't come up with that. That was somebody else. But the creativity comes from our spirit. And our to-do list comes from the Spirit of God. Like, what does he want me to do? And then my productivity rate goes up and up and up. And in the evening, I look back and go, hey, I did these things. Oh, I didn't do that. Can I do that tomorrow, Father? Do you want me just to scrap that? Was that from my idea or yours? And so what we're recovered from is the ism, the insanity of addiction, the insanity of the body and mental disease that we have. And then we actually recover from, we go from the insanity of addiction to the insanity that I got this, the insanity that I can run my life properly. And then we enter into the shore of faith, and that's a faithful relationship with the Spirit of God. And so when I have that cultivated in the garden, and I look at the Garden of Eden, where the creator actually came in the garden with Adam and Eve, and then they could talk and ask questions and help get guidance. And how do we cultivate this? What name should we name that animal? That animal scares me. What do we do here? I'm cultivating the garden. But God's not always in the garden with him. His presence is, his spirit is, but then the enemy comes in as well. And this is what we recover from, is the enemy having control over our emotions, our mind, our spirit, all of those things, because the enemy came into them. And the enemy came into their garden and said, hey, can't you eat all the fruit here? Man, you got some nice trees. And they said, and she said, yeah, we can eat everything except for one. That's a no-no. And then the narrative started of fear coming in, of fear saying, well, you're a little bit controlled. Oh, don't you want to be like your dad? Don't you want to be better than you are? Don't you want to know good and evil? Oh, but we'll surely die. Stop it. That's silliness. Your dad wouldn't kill you. No dad's going to kill you. But this is what free will is. God's love and fear. And recovery is being able to be guided by God's love to conquer fear. Where God's perfect love is, there is no fear. And so fear is going to come at us, but recovery has given me the ability to see it coming. We need the fellowship, we need each other, we need the meetings, and we need to grow in our spiritual contact with God on a daily basis. And so for me, this is what recovered is. I've recovered the relationship that was available at the beginning of humanity, a beginning of creation of man and woman, was that garden that was on the inside. And so if you look on the outside, that's God's territory, responsibility, the cosmos, the black holes, the other things on the outside of that garden. I don't know what's out there. I don't need to know. God's in control. I need to be in the center of the garden. But my employer takes me out there. My fear takes me out there. The amount of money that I need, the commitments that I've gotten into that I need to be on the outside. Recovery is abandoning your old life and getting a new life in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit. So that's my just a share on recovery.